Do you struggle with selecting the right colors for your pixel art? An easy way to tell this is by converting your picture to grayscale. If your colors blend together or if the image loses clarity, there's a good chance you don't have enough contrast. So here's the idea I wanted to test out. What if I make a picture in grayscale first and then colorize it? There's a few steps involved, but I think it could completely change the way you make pixel art. Let's do it. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Robinson of Robinson Pixels. I'll go ahead and pull up the drawing I did in Procreate that I used as the base for the pixel art. I drew Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz for this because she starts out in a grayish land and ends up in a world of color, which is, you know, what I'm doing here. I'm giving Dorothy goggles because in the book, the Emerald City is not all shiny and green. It's just that everyone is required to wear green tinted glasses that make them think it is. Now my Dorothy's gonna get boots, not slippers. These are roughly inspired by the Power Glove for the NES back in the day. Yeah, I'm thinking this works on the meta level that my Dorothy is starting out as a sketch, but she'll be digitized into pixels. As for Toto, he is 100% just based on my old dog Critter, who I used to draw into funny scenes all the time. Alright, it's pixel time. The canvas I'm using is 240 by 160 pixels, which is the standard resolution for the Game Boy Advance. I've imported my drawing into Pixaki as a reference layer so I can trace it. This should all work in Sprite as well if that's what you use. I'm keeping the characters pretty big here because I want this to look like cutscene style pixel art. And because I'm getting rusty with full-size drawings, I need the practice. Of course, the hardest part is just deciding what details can actually stay and which ones have to go. I'm leaving some of the details a little junky right now because I figure I can fix them up once I color it. And speaking of which, let's add the flats. I'm using the bucket fill to color it in. This step always reminds me of a Ninja Turtles coloring game I used to have on the PC. Actually, now that I think about it, that may have been my very first taste of pixel art at all. Let me know in the comments what got you into pixel art because apparently it can be anything. Anyway, this palette is Grayscale 16, which I found at lowspec.com, link in the description. The checkers on the dress were tough to figure out since fabric folds, until I remembered some characters like Stan from Monkey Island have plaid patterns that just don't follow the shape of the fabric. That style was much easier to do, especially since I'm just supposed to be doing a color experiment here. Now what I had planned to do next was shade the entire thing using Grayscale 16, but that seemed like it would take a while. So instead, my Dorothy and Toto are gonna be like ogres and onions. They're gonna have layers. Specifically, I'm using a multiply layer, which combines the color of that layer with whatever's beneath it. I'm using a dark gray with the multiply layer at 43% opacity to do my shading. Once I had my initial base multiply layer down, I decided I want this sprite to have some real depth. So I added another multiply layer, also at 43% opacity. By stacking them on top of each other, I can doubly darken the areas that need more shadows. And the reason I used the same opacity for both was so that if I brushed over an area on this layer that I didn't hit with the first layer, I'd get the same color, and I wouldn't have too many shades floating out there. The fun part about shading this way is that if you decide to change the base color, the shading will update automatically. But for the highlights, I just colored them in manually, no crazy layers here. Now we're ready for the magic to happen. It's still gonna take a few steps to get there, so don't bail early or you'll only be partway there. Let's colorize. I'm gonna add a new layer between the flat colors and the multiply layers, and I'll change its blending mode to color. On the original layer, I selected just her skin tone, then popped back over to that new color layer, and with a little bucket fill, ta-da! It's not the best skin tone, so I'll fiddle with it a few times, but the basic idea is it doesn't color exactly using the color I picked. It adjusts the lightness based on the lightness of the gray base layer. I'm gonna pull up a Grayscale Mega Man sprite so you can really kind of see the benefits of what's going on here. With a color blending layer above him, I can use the same blue on the light and dark sections, and it automatically adjusts based on the lightness of the gray underneath. And if I switch to red or green or whatever, I don't have to worry because the contrast was already decided based on the Grayscale layer. And of course you can use two different types of blue to get closer to that original Mega Man color scheme. Let's return to Oz. While I'm plugging in the colors, I'll mention I'm not going to use red for the boots, like her ruby slippers from the movie. You see, in the books, her slippers are silver, so that's what the boots will be here. You may notice the colors are a little muted, and that's because right now they're being shaded with those gray multiply layers. But in real life, colors normally shift hues as they get lighter or darker. I normally go towards blue for shadows. So here's a little cheat. I just recolored my multiply layers from gray to navy blue. It's subtle, but if you look at the boots, or even along the dress, the newer, bluer version has some more life to it. Now, what I'm still not sold on is her skin tone. It's shifted too far into blue. Rather than fiddling with more multiply layers, I decided to manually take it from here. I flattened all my layers and hand selected her colors to be a little warmer. Yeah, this looks more natural. I did some adjustments, like redoing her arm that was too long. In general, you should take breaks so you catch this kind of thing before you shade, and then it's not as hard to fix. And my final gripe is with the color count. I generally like my colors pretty limited, and I have somehow ended up with over 40 unique colors here. I could go through and manually overwrite the similar ones to make the picture more cohesive. Or I can export this picture into GIMP and change the image mode from the default RGB to indexed instead. For a standard 16-bit sprite, the max color count would be 15 colors per character. I've got 2 on the screen, so I'm just going to reduce it to 26 colors and call it a day. Even though it's not a massive difference, I feel better knowing the colors are now a little more cohesive. Let's throw in a background so we can take a final look at Dorothy and Toto in the digital pixels of Oz. We got a background now, it's partly drawn, it goes to colors and it's pixelated. I don't know why I'm singing now, I don't know why I'm singing now. Pixels! If you want to know more about indexed mode and how to do it and why you would do it, check out my video on pixel art shortcuts right over here. See ya! And we're ready for the magic to happen. It's going to take several steps to do.